Last week I said Star Trek was back, but is it here to stay? My name is Andrew. I love sci-fi, and today I'm going to review the second episode of Strange New Worlds, Children of the Comet. Last week, the bar was set incredibly high by the Strange New Worlds premiere. Does Children of the Comet measure up, or does it even have a chance? I had a lot of hope going into this first episode, and I have to admit that I was a little shaken when we had the recap from last week. The thing with episodic television is, if you're going to have episodic television, you don't need the recaps. Each episode is supposed to be self-contained, and so streaming services have really transformed how we have watched shows, and even back in the 60s, 80s, 90s, even the early 2000s, with all the different Star Trek shows, we never needed recaps. But going into a new episode every week, we don't need to be reminded of what happened in previous episodes. Trust the viewer, producers. Trust the viewer. But once that got aside, we meet Uhura. We see her in her dress uniform. We start to figure out what she's doing. And this episode actually delivered a very good Uhura story. I like everything that Gooding is bringing to her role. You really see the nervousness of a cadet, someone who's not as sure as herself, and she admits it in this episode that she's not sure she's cut out for Starfleet. Starfleet was an escape for her. She wanted to escape some very tragic situations in her life in Kenya. You could see her discomfort as she interacted with all the different crew members, especially the ANR chief engineer, Hemmer, especially Spock. She had some uneasiness with Pike, and one thing that was nice to see in this episode is that even though it is episodic television, you still have those character beats that are transferring from episode to episode, and they are not fully resolving those beats. Pike is still dealing with accepting his fate. Even though it's not going to happen for 10 years, he's still struggling with it. I have to say, I know there's been some debate about the Enterprise sets. I'm loving the Enterprise sets. I'm still having some struggles with how big some of the sets are, like Pike's quarters. Pike has a very big cabin, but it's used very well. And I do like how Pike has been set further and further apart from the likes of Kirk, from the likes of Picard, from the likes of Sisko or Janeway or Archer. I did love Archer for trying to wrap around his crew using the captain's mess. And I think Pike takes this a major step further. Not only does he bring his senior staff to the table, he also brings the random officer from throughout his ship, because he really wants to know what's going on, not just with his ship, but with his crew. This is a captain who cares. And I think that caring captain is ultimately what is going to lead to Pike's unfortunate fate. But it is so incredibly and indelibly Pike that I love this. I love the camaraderie, the loyalty, the trust that he's establishing with his crew, and that he's allowing the crew to establish with each other. I'm not going to lie about this one. Sam Kirk was a sore spot for me in this episode. So I don't have a problem with the character. I don't have a problem with the actor. I have a problem with the situation he was put in today. There are 4 characters on this show that we know how fate is going to treat them. We know how Pike's story ends. We know how Spock's story ends. We know how Uhura's story ends. And we also know how Sam Kirk's story ends. Sam Kirk is supposed to die 10 years from now. So when he touched that egg and he was near death, there was no emotional investment in the audience. There was no emotional twinge, because we knew that's not how Sam Kirk was going to die. We did not need that. We didn't need the sideline Sam Kirk. So now I kind of feel like Sam is here for gimmicks. As we went through the episode, I did love hearing a lot of modernized versions of those TOS sounds, those bridge beeps, the sound of different rooms. And I heard it in the score. It was great hearing, especially as we start to realize, hey, there's some major trouble on the Comet. The landing party's trapped. There were some very distinct TOS sounds that felt very sick. There was a very good 60s vibe coming out of that. And it really felt like, hey, this really is Star Trek. It feels a lot more natural and a lot more true than the JJ movies. So I think, Strange New Worlds is still on a good track. Last week, Star Trek gave us the opportunity to see a society at a flashpoint. Today, Star Trek was dealing with very personal issues, whether it's a person's self-worth, self-confidence, ability to believe in oneself, and then also predestination. Pike knows how his story ends. We know how the other characters, how their stories wind up. And so Pike is still navigating this whole, I know I have this thing 10 years out. I still don't know what to do with it. Even Una points it out. Chris, you have this chance to save everyone. And even the Arbiter, knowing that Spock was going to play a role in not just saving the Dilemma, but helping to provide a new element to their environment that could help trigger their societal evolution. We all may have little bits of destiny, not really knowing what those destinies are. And as we start to play our part in life and our part in the great tapestry of our society, I think it's incredible to see those things. And it helps us to remember, okay, every person is really here for a purpose. We might not understand what that purpose is until we reach that event or until after that event has transpired. But at least we all have a part to play. No life is wasted. Some of us may struggle more than others, but no life is wasted. That was a great message for Star Trek to deliver today. So at the beginning of this episode, I asked if Star Trek was here to stay. The answer is yes. We all know that you can have a great first outing. Just like any musician, you can have a great solo track, but can you follow up on that success? And I believe Strange New Worlds has. I'm scoring this episode at 4.5, slightly behind last week's premiere, but I think still a great episode and one that will probably wind up on essential Strange New World lists as times and seasons go on. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening to my opinion about this show. I can't wait to see you next week. I have a lot more new content planned for you. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you thought about this episode. Until next time, live long and prosper.